Also, if you are not speaking, please remember to mute your microphone so that we don't get a whole lot of background noise. For today's community meeting, we are going to start out with a demo of AppZ by Regis Krishnan, who is going to show off this tool. Regis, do you want to go ahead?
Yep. So I'll go straight to the demo. So my name is again Regis Krishnan. So I'm the co-founder of CloudBond. So what we do is we take Kubernetes and we created a platform for enterprises to deploy enterprise applications to private and public cloud. And behind the scenes, it's basically deploying to Kubernetes. So what our platform does is it integrates the source control system, primarily GitHub. We also integrate with SVN and CVS. We take the changes from source control. We use their build system, either Maven, Gradle, or Jenkins. We build it and then deploy it to a Kubernetes cluster or clusters. So I'm going to show you today a demo. I'm going to share my screen now. Let me find the screen. So here is an application that's running in Kubernetes now. This is, by the way, this is running in AWS now. So as you can see, it's a sample application that I created for demos. So it's running 0.3402 version, running on Apache Tomcat, and it is running on actually two nodes or two pods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the platform works and how the platform helps build and deploy an application in Kubernetes. So I'm going to go back to the source of this. So here is GitHub. Again, it is a public project. So this is a typical Tomcat project. So what we do is we kind of make it simple. So in the project, we introduce a file called appz.yaml. So I'm opening the appz YAML now. So this YAML file contains some basic information about the app. Then it also tells us how to build it. In this particular case, it's an Ant build. And then it also tells me or tells the system where to deploy. So here, you can see that there is a Kubernetes context here, and it says 2 replicas and what port to expose. And then it has some custom properties. Now, the idea is to have different YAML files for different environments. Like, for example, for dev, there will be one YAML file. For testing, there will be another one. And then for production, there will be another one. And for this demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a simple dev deployment. So I'm going to edit this file. So before I do that, I'm going to go back to our engine. That's our backend that kind of coordinates all this. So I'm going to use our tab tool and check the status of the engine. So the backend is designed using microservices architecture. So we have several components kind of connected together using a hub. So this tells me everything is running good. So I'm going to watch, build, and deploy microservices. So I use the -I option of our tab tool. So this would most likely be used by administrators of our platform. So I'm watching, build, and deploy. So now I'm going to make a change. So here in the application, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the title and one property here. It says 179 here. So I'm going to make a change. So this time I'm making a change in the appz YAML itself, but instead you can make a change in any source file. So I'm going to edit it. I'm going to make it 180. And I'm going to change the title to say today's date. I'm going to add today's date, so 15. So I'm going to commit. Now, as soon as it we commit, the backend picks up the change and starts building. So I'm using the tab tool. I'm watching live what's happening. So it's now already compiled it, and now it's pushing the Docker image. Now I can see the build is done. So now I'm going to go back to my inbox. So I'll get an email from the system saying that the build is successful and the new version 403 is build is complete, and it took about 15 seconds. It also gives me, if there are any warnings or errors during the build, it will also add that to the message. Now, when I go back to the log, I can see that, the deployment is also done. So if I go back to the inbox, I'll see the email where it says version 403. It's done. It took about 9 seconds. So now if I go back to the application, so you can see that, this is the old version is running. So now I'm going to reload this page. So now you can see the new version is up and running. So it's running on 2 new pods, and the value of the nano also changed. So here, during the time that I was showing you the log, it built and deployed and created the new 2 pods. Now this is a simple application. So I'll deploy one more application. So it's Tomcat workload. It's basically the Apache Tomcat project. We forked it and introduced our apps YAML in it. So it's going to, when I make a change here, it's going to build. It's a larger project, so I'm going to make a minor change here. Commit. So I can show you the current version running. So here is the current version running. This is the Tomcat samples project. So it has around, I think, about 1,500 source files. So 1,560 source files. It's compiling behind the scenes. Once the compiling is done, it basically uses Kubernetes to deploy it. So it's now building. So build is successful. So I should see the email. So there's the email. So it says, it took about 36 seconds to build. Now it looks like the deployment is also done. So it took about 9 seconds. So let's go back to the application. So this is the previous version. So when I click on this link again, I should see the new version running. So here's a new version. Now, a couple of things about the YAML file. So this particular project or the application is deploying on Tomcat. Now, if I were to change this, for example, so we also created other image templates. So these are nothing but Docker files with different application servers. So I can take, say, for example, the Tomcat LoadGen application. I can deploy it to, say, WebSphere. So all I need to do is change that image template to WebSphere 8. So I'm deploying it now. So SP, I made a typo there, so I'm going to fix that. SPH. You commit the change. So it's going to build again, and now it's going to deploy it to WebSphere. So what we have done is, for the enterprises, we made it simple to basically create different types of image templates and simply put all the information in a YAML file, and we basically pick up from the YAML file. We integrate the build and deploy, and the deployment part is done using Kubernetes. So here you can see that the WebSphere deployment is done. So this was the Tomcat LoadGen application. So it looks like it's now the WebSphere is coming up. So I have the emails here saying that the build is complete. So 405. So you can see that the template is WebSphere 8. And the deployment is also successful. So WebSphere takes a few more seconds to come up. So let's try it now. There it is. So it's now running on WebSphere, the same project running on WebSphere. Done in it took about 45 seconds.
Okay.
Now we also have a UI. So you can log into the UI, and they can see the deployments here. So I can click on the different builds, and then pull the logs if they want to see the logs. So here, you can, this is the build log. And also you can drill down to some of the details, like for example, the message that came from GitHub, you can view that. So basically we keep track of all the messages as well as the log that are going, that are kind of going across the different microservices. Then we also have, for example, this was the build log. You can also click on the deployment activity. So it's now showing the different deployments, and I can also pull the deployment logs. Here you can actually see the kubectl commands that it executed. And we also tap into Heapster and pick up all the data and then show it in a single chart. So here, all the Heapster data is also shown in the same dashboard. So,
okay. Well, thank you very much. An interesting deployment tool. It's all the time we have for the demo. So if you have questions for Regith, please ask them in chat. Regith, if you bring up your chat window, you can answer questions for people there. Or there will be links to AppZ and other information in the notes. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our release updates. So, and that, of course, starts with the upcoming release. Jace, you want to take it away with the 1.10 update?
Sure thing. So 110 is in the over the top of the hill phase. So basically we're at week 7 of 12. And there is a link in the community meeting agenda for the full schedule if you want to follow along with where we're at. We're looking on track so far to meet our release target of March 21st. Obviously, a lot can change between now and then. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully we'll continue being on track. And this week we are cutting a beta. We're having a couple of issues with the release tool Anago, and we're trying to sort those out. So the beta probably will be released tomorrow or maybe Monday. So slightly off schedule, but still early enough in the release cycle that you can start testing against it, which we highly encourage because that's a great way to get early signal on release quality. We are also setting up the release branch. There was an email that went out to Kubernetes dev and some other lists that basically said that it's time to do cherry picks against the 110 branch, and that is not correct. Just keep committing as we currently do. The cherry picks into the 110 branch actually happen after code freeze, and those will be done by the release team. So basically things hit master first, and then they always get cherry picked back, just like normal. So no change to current process there. Next week is code slush, and that's where we're trying to sort out the issue sort of relevancy for the release signal. And so SIGs need to mark their corresponding issues that they want to address before the release with approved for milestone. And the bot will definitely enforce the labeling on those as we go past code freeze. So just a reminder that all issues in the milestone are considered release blocking. The reason we do that is because it gives SIGs a chance to pull the proverbial stop chain on the release if there's something that could negatively impact the community in the release and is known. There are obviously known issues in the release, and we'll have those discussions as the time gets closer to determine what is actually release blocking. But we definitely don't want to sacrifice release quality for meeting the target date, because while it is a plan to have a quarterly release cadence, it is a little bit arbitrary, and quality will always preempt schedule. So definitely keep your SIGs on top of any issues. Make sure they're labeled in a way that is consistent with where we're at in the release process. And lastly, code freeze will begin on February 26th, and that's where we basically stop pulling, fast forwarding the entire master branch into the release branch, and we start selectively cherry picking commits out that are for test fixes, for quality fixes. Let's say you find an issue and you fix it as a SIG, that will allow us to pull that code in. And basically, we curate the branch from that point forward, and then that is what gets released as a release. Are there any questions?
I'll just add a comment, which is about, at this point, 30 to 40% of the issues that are in the milestone are not properly labeled. And all of those that are not labeled are going to get kicked out on Code Slush. If you don't go ahead and complete the labels on them, I will be pestering people in Slack about that.
Yes, thank you very much. And those labels are, again, the important for the release team to understand what the status of any particular work is. We don't have a lot of things to work off of, so labels become quite important, especially from just the human readability standpoint. So in terms of the other releases in progress, 1.9.3 is out. 1.9.4 is planned in 2 weeks. And 1.8.8 is freshly out. So if you're looking for some of those cherry picks that have gone back into those release branches, they are out there and ready to use. And if there's no other questions, that's it for me.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So our Medhul and Joe are not actually dialing in for this one. They just sent along their updates. For 1.9, 1.9.3 is out. It's been released. Medhul is planning on 1.9.4 in approximately 2 weeks. So if you have fixes that are backported to 1.9, please get them merged in the next week. Also for 1.8, 1.8.8 is out. No definite plans on 1.8.9. So I think that's it for release updates, which means we are now into SIG updates. So we're going to start out with SIG testing. So Aaron, you want to do SIG testing?
Sure. Hi, SIG testing here. I'm Eric Rickenberger, your friendly SIG testing lead. I'm going to ramble through a couple random things that have happened. I don't really have that much of a roadmap-y type of update for you this time around. As always, all of these links are in the meeting notes, which is where I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, so first off, I wanted to give a big thanks to the Amazon EKS team who hosted a good chunk of the SIG testing folks for a face-to-face meeting on January 26th. A lot of us are sort of co-located in Seattle, so that seemed like a convenient thing to do. If you are also based in the Seattle area and would be interested in participating further, please come on down to the SIG testing Slack channel or look for announcements of further meetups going forward on the SIG testing mailing list. We found that it was pretty productive to just have sort of a high bandwidth conversation with folks in the room. And we also were working to include some remote folks. So if there's value in that, come check us out.
Let me use that moment, Aaron, to offer to any of the SIGs or folks that are just looking for some space to come in and have a meeting, to have a Kubernetes SIG or working group meeting or any, just please reach out to me and we will be happy to support that.
Cool. Yeah, it was a good time. So I would love to proudly announce that we have finally accomplished our goal of getting rid of Jenkins and our 100-ish Jenkins slaves. They're gone. So every single job that is run for this project, be that a pull request job or a post submit job or a periodic job, they're all run natively on a Kubernetes cluster now. So hooray, Jenkins is dead, long live proud. I think I announced this a couple weeks ago, but I'll just reiterate that SIG testing now has a new sub-project called the Testing Commons sub-project, where I like to talk about how we will defend to the death your right to run tests, but we're not going to write them for you. But the Testing Commons place is a great place to talk about best practices and common practices for writing tests. I imagine there's going to be an influx of tests being written to flesh out sort of conformance and different conformance profiles. And I would expect that's going to be a great place to participate in that endeavor and sort of identify best practices and reusable frameworks for all of that to happen. I'll get a little bit later to one of the common issues that came up, but that happens every 2 weeks, 7:30 a.m. Pacific time Wednesday, because we're trying to be friendly to some European folks that are collaborating with us. Something you may have noticed in the middle of January, maybe not, maybe you don't check test grid as obsessively as I do, but test grid got rewritten in Go. And so this page used to take like 30 odd seconds to load up, and it loads phenomenally faster now. This is like a massive world of difference. So I just want to give a huge thanks to Brian Hitchman and whomever else helped out with this, just to give you an idea of how much more responsive it is. I don't know that this Dropbox link is going to live forever. But the blue dots here represent in seconds sort of how long it took for each and every one of the dashboards to return a response when hit for the first time. And you can see some of them took longer than 10 seconds. Whereas with the Go version, yeah, we do have a few outliers at 5 seconds, but almost all of them are much, much faster, because note this is kind of a logarithmic scale here. Faster tools are better. You see the data faster. It's great. So Prow's been getting a bit of a facelift lately, thanks to a new team member on the GKE Inchprod team, whose name I don't have off the top of my head. I apologize, but you know, we set up this bot commands redirect a while ago for folks who don't know all the various commands you can use on pull requests. This used to link to a markdown table. It now links to a live copy of Prow, since Prow is the thing that implements all of these bot commands. And you have sort of the command itself on the left-hand side, some example usages of that command here, a description of what the command would do, and a description of who can do it. You can also, here, I'm going to hide this thing here. You can also see the plugin that implements it. So for example, the assign plugin, I can click on that and get information about the assign plugin. There's a bug right now where this doesn't entirely work for all of the repos, but the idea is this page right here is showing you all potential commands that could be used anywhere ever. But if you're interested in the commands that just work, say, in the community repo, you'll get a list of the commands that work there. The eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that there are more repos being supported by Prow than just Kubernetes repos. So like kubeflow, for example, is using just these commands. Or CRI is using these commands. This is all because Prow is just like way, way easier to administer than multiple Munch GitHub instances. We sort of have the same thing going now with plugins. So I went back to the doc just to show you that link, but I could have also gotten there from this menu on the side here, hopping between the command help and the list of available plugins. And again, so most, but not all plugins will implement some of those commands. Some of them implement some automation that's not necessarily accessible. And so this just gives you an idea of all of the potential commands that you could set up for a given repository or GitHub organization that Prow is configured to support. So for example, the lifecycle plugin, I can take a look at that and see what commands that has, and this will link me through to the command page. Okay. How are we doing with Tide these days? So if you look at the umbrella issue for our attempt to roll out Tide, Tide's the thing we want to replace the submit queue, right? If I go and take a look at the Tide UI, it shows me that it's potentially looking at all of these pull requests here. And this merge requirements tab shows me that Tide has a couple, basically just GitHub queries where Tide only looks for the set of issues, or sorry, set of pull requests in these repositories that have these labels, that don't have these labels, that have all of their checks passing. There's another query here, for example, that's running just for the kubectl label. That's making sure they only have the CLA label and that they don't have these do not merge labels. However, there is the requirement that there's an actual approved review. You know, when you submit your review and you actually submit it instead of /LGTMing, you get this nice little check mark icon there. So it's pretty flexible, but we're trying to move to a world where most everything uses the same set of merge requirements here. One of the big things we want before we roll it out to Kubernetes in general is a more representative or user-friendly way of understanding what needs to be done to make my pull request merge. So if you take a look at this discussion here on how best to represent tied status, right now you may have noticed you're getting a tied status just like not in tied pool or something like that. And so we're having a pretty lively debate about the best way to represent this. Ultimately, we want to get to a world where the existing Kubernetes repo kind of for any pull requests, the bunch GitHub, submit queue, has a status context down at the bottom here, submit queue, right? And it kind of tells you why the submit queue doesn't think the pull request is ready to merge yet. This isn't the most in-depth piece of information, but it's something. We're trying to get Tide to basically do the same thing, where it says like, Tide's not ready to merge this because all the tests aren't passing, or because it seems to be missing labels, things of that nature. If you're interested in participating in that discussion or helping us flesh this out, because I would always encourage and welcome input from a wider audience instead of just a select few people, this would be the issue to go do that. Something that's coming up, we've been looking at, as you may know, we use Bazel to do a lot of the building and testing on our CI infrastructure because it's really good at knowing exactly what to build and how and when. Bazel has recently introduced the feature of remote caching, and we're looking at introducing this for some of our jobs. It's taken some of the jobs down drastically in terms of how long they take to build. Some other jobs that are more disk intensive, maybe less so. So hopefully, just as with Test Grid, where things just kind of magically got faster, pull requests are going to magically start passing or failing faster. We have a proposal out there to make it easier for folks to upload their conformance results to Test Grid. Right now, to get your stuff into Test Grid requires that you upload things to Google Cloud Storage according to a set of sort of a schema, which I think I can click here to get to. Yeah, so if you want to contribute test results today, here's the document that tells you how to do that. This is in the test info repo in the docs subdirectory called contributing test results. And basically, you need to make sure that you upload to a Google Cloud Storage bucket that kind of looks something like this. You put the right metadata in a started JSON and a finished JSON. You put your build log here, and then you put your test results as JUnit files. So this proposal is suggesting that perhaps we take the output from Sonobuoy, which is what's used to generate conformance results, and see if we can just from the artifacts from Sonobuoy generate the appropriate JUnit files to simulate as if a test had actually run, and then get those placed up into Test Grid. Because we'd love to get to a world where vendors who say they're conformant aren't just submitting pull requests, but they can actually point to a live dashboard that shows continued conformance compliance or continued conformance certification, whatever. You get the idea. I also had this hanging out a little while ago. I'm going to formalize this proposal here to document what the suggested criteria are for release blocking and merge blocking tests in terms of ownership and in terms of some of the qualities of the tests, including like how often they run, how long they take to run, how often they pass given the same commit, things of that nature. How am I doing on time? Okay.
It's been a bit of time. You want to do one more minute?
Yeah, sure.
Finish up.
Another thing I want to encourage folks to come talk about if you have an interest in this is the concept of Docker and Docker, or a local cluster based on Docker and Docker. We want to get to a world where running E2E tests doesn't involve standing up a full-blown cluster with a cloud and all of its virtual machines. We instead want to get to a world where there are a bunch of Docker containers that basically represent the cluster. Fun fact, that would also be super and extremely useful for local development. This has been tried time and time again. There are multiple implementations out there. I've heard that Cluster Lifecycle has some scripts to do this around a Amaranthus-based project. And we basically want to get to a world where we kind of converge on one effort and try to use that going forward. So we had a healthy discussion about this in the February 6th SIG testing meeting, and we're looking to put together a proposal so we can get folks to rally around and iterate. This is the sort of thing where I would expect Testing Commons is going to be the place where we're going to have the most discussion about this in the interest of making it a reusable framework. But yeah, Jess, we would totally welcome the help. So 100% it makes sounds awesome. On that, I think I will leave it there. Thanks, Josh. Back to you.
Thank you very much for that extensive update. So our next update is from SIG Contributor Experience. So Paris.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Paris from Contributor Experience. I am going to share my screen as well. So hold on one second here. All right. Everybody see my screen? Thumbs up. All right, cool. All right. So as I was doing these updates, I realized how many awesome contributors that we have. So I'm actually going to do this backwards. And thanks so much to all the awesome contributors that we have helping out in Contributor Experience for a wide array of things. Brief name drops: George, Aaron, Sadev, Tim, Gwyn, so many of you that have jumped in to really help out with this. Thank you so much. So first things first, our charter, the draft is now being socialized within our group. I'll happily screen share that. I won't necessarily link it. It is still rather raw. But this is coming from the TLDR short version of the template from the steering committee that's being circulated right now for approval. It has not been approved yet, but we thought we would get ahead, and it's actually given us some framework for what to do. So this is just our charter, and I'm about to actually go through in depth some of these items that we're actually working on right now. But you should be seeing this checked in, I'd say, within the next week or so after we get some more circulation and feedback going from our crew. Next, contributor guide. This has been a huge chunk of time for multiple people. We started out with about 65 pages of just contributor guide content, which is huge. That's not, and we're not actually talking about developer guide either. Developer guide would bring us to something over 100 pages. So what we're really trying to solve for here is discoverability. Lots of folks say that they can't find certain contributor documents. And then also holes in the process, documentation, broken links, and of course, adding a better flow to the contributor guide documents. We have a new area in K Community for contributor that is right here. This, like I said before, includes developer guide as well as contributor guide information, for instance, CLA info. But the discoverability piece is really important because a lot of us thought that we should have contributor and developer guide information on Kubernetes.io. It's where a lot of people are looking for documentation outside of just GitHub from the project. So as you can see right here, this is live. Big kudos to Docs, George, and Gwyn, and other folks that have been working on this behind the scenes. But we actually hope to have this out the door with an MVP more formulated by the 1.9 release. So check back for more information with that. Let's see, what else? Mentoring, that's been a huge piece to our pie here. We really want to focus on the contributor membership growth. We do have a membership ladder here. I should put that link in the agenda. I will in a second, actually. But those are member, reviewer, approver, owner, maintainer. Each one of those steps has different roles and responsibilities, which also includes different skills for each one. So we are really focusing on each one of those ladder roles, as well as trying to prevent things like burnout, and also just increasing learning and development for the Kubernetes project in whole. We're in a testing phase right now with every proposed idea that we've had thus far. We've been learning a great deal. One of the things is time zones suck and we hate them. But that is taking place right now in our group mentoring program. Group mentoring, the idea is coming from peer networking, peer mentorship. One of the main problems that we're trying to solve for is time. We can't grow time from trees, and I think time is something that we hear from mentorship as two reasons why people don't participate. We are all super busy folks, but we know that mentoring is important. So that was taken into consideration in a great deal when establishing all of these processes and programs. So group mentoring is exactly what it sounds like, 10 to 12 folks who are all achieving the same goal. So for instance, for this test cycle, we have 10 to 12 members who are all going to reviewership in 3 different projects. They all share a Slack channel. They do stand-ups, and then we also have workshops for them, and those workshops are in development as we speak. Tim Hawken actually just did a code review the Kubernetes way yesterday, and that was, or actually Tuesday, which was an hour long, and he actually did not finish. So we know, I think we need a Kubernetes 101 code review and probably a 102 code review. He didn't even touch the API pieces. So this is all growing, and from us, we started with nothing. So we also had Laurie Apple come and do a 1-hour interactive communication course. And that's something that we're trying to build from these workshops is interactive sessions to add value to the people that are taking the time out to give this 1 hour, to sit there during this 1-hour process. And we have great feedback so far from the workshop-based classes from the groups that we're working on. And the group mentoring piece would take about 3 months. Why 3 months? Because that's how long it typically takes to get from each rung of the process according to our membership guidelines. If you disagree with that, please comment on the community membership markdown file. But that's sort of what we're going for here, to stick with those requirements that we've laid out unless they otherwise change. Google Summer of Code, shout out to Nikita for helping us run that. She actually was a former Google Summer of Code intern for the project and has now turned into lead. So that is definitely a success case worth mentioning. She, I don't believe, needs any help for that at this point in time. I think they're just kicking off with mentor matching and things like that. We've also participated in Outreachy, which is also still going on. We have 2 Outreachy interns. For those who are not familiar with Outreachy, it's a third-party program run by Sage Sharp and others who pay for underrepresented folks in tech to have an internship experience with major projects such as Kubernetes, different Linux distros, etc. That is also a long-term solution for us because these are 3 to 5 month long semester type of deals. Both of those individuals sit in SIG CLI, and they were paid for by CNCF and Google. So next round, we would love to see more organizations step up and sponsor this effort, as well as other SIGs. And then we also have another program that I'm proposing called the Buddy Guide program. If you were at GopherCon last year, they had a program called the Buddy Guide program for folks who were new to Go and new to GopherCon. I'm actually trying to think of extending that to a longer term solution. One-on-one mentoring is the traditional elements. So this is kind of getting us to that traditional, except again, with the time factor involved, we're talking about a 1 hour, one-time sort of tour guide of the Kubernetes ecosystem. And that would be with a contributor of like a higher rung ladder than you, and just kind of a quick ask us anything, if you will. That's just proposed right now. Chris Short may or may not lead this effort, depending on what the thoughts of other people are with this project. Also meet our contributors. That's a very short-term, quick way of getting mentors on demand. That's a 1 month right now, once a month program. I'd like to expand this to at least bi-weekly, but what we're doing right now is sort of an Ask Us Anything. We had our first one on the first Wednesday of this month, and it went really, really well. We had about 5 folks of many different backgrounds and varieties on the call, and we took questions from Twitter and Slack, and that was really, really awesome. So we need a lot of help with this, especially the issues and things that are located within the agenda. Again, I already mentioned the outreachy pieces, but we also need more contributors for the meet our contributors pieces. Oh no, can you not see my screen anymore? Ah, hold on 1 second, don't move.
No, we still see your screen.
Okay, cool. All right. It's just our room that can't see the screen. All right, cool. It's just us, no worries. All right, cool. So what was I saying? Oh, need more contributors for the Meet Our Contributors piece. Again, this is just you being on a live streamed call, answering questions. Most of the questions are more on the human side than the actual contribution side, like how did you get into open source? We had a lot of those questions. We also have a lot of questions about where do I start? And it's just giving your opinions on those things. So there is an issue link for signing up for help there as well in the agenda. We also need a lot of help with building skills workshops for this group mentoring and future home of Kubernetes learning and development. Examples are in the mentee guide of what I'm talking about, and just like what I mentioned earlier, surrounding communication, code review, writing release notes, writing better documentation, how to be an approver. The list can go on and ideas can go on, and we really need help with identifying the skills that we have gaps with. So if you are, for instance, an approver and or owner maintainer listening right now, think about the ways that your contributors could be better, not necessarily in a selfish way, but as just from a growth perspective, like how can we grow the folks that you have right now? That's very important. Also, please think about if you're a SIG lead, how you're actually growing the mentors, what the strategy is that you have, how can we plug you into what we have right now from a testing perspective. Please reach out to us. That's it for the mentoring piece. Next is DevStats. We are sort of reverse engineering DevStats at this point. We really need feedback on the data that you want to see, and specifically what questions do you need answered about the project. So that's the reverse engineering part. So if there's anything that you've ever wanted to know about this project, what is it? And we'll try to figure out what the best dashboard is for that approach. We realize that adoption of the tool has been a little slower than most. Shout out to SIGDocs. I was in their meeting yesterday where they used a graph to establish some SLOs for response times. That's exactly what the tool is for. And if you are have not adopted the tool yet for any reason, please see us. We constantly are filing issues with DevStats on things like, hey, I think some data is missing, etc. So it's very important that we get this right. So if you do see data that is missing or inaccurate, please let us know. If anybody on the call is interested in stats, metrics, the health and life of the project, how we're measuring velocity, health, etc., we need your help. So come see us. Next is documenting and improving communication platforms. That's a big deal for us. We did release some Slack guidelines. We are working on new calendar solutions. We are also working on issue triage and labeling. We've proposed and created triage solution guidelines, also new labels. All of that is in the agenda. Please provide feedback there. And then some miscellaneous items. We are going on a roadshow. What this means is we'll visit, one of us will visit every SIG and working group meeting from a quarterly basis to make sure that there's a feedback loop that's closed ultimately, making sure that your group is cool with changes from a contributor experience side that are either going on or have gone on, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and also get feedback from you on how we can make this better. We are having a face-to-face next Tuesday. I'm sorry. Okay. We are having a face-to-face this Tuesday at the Index Conference. It'll be about 8 to 10 of us. Swing by if you'd like to help us get through some old PRs and things like that. We are also doing the Contributor Summit again this year at the Copenhagen KubeCon. That is May 1st. More information will be coming out about that in the next week or so. This is an open invite to all contributors. We are changing the format, and we'll have a lot more new contributor components this year as well.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So thank you very much for that summary of lots of ContribX activity. Daniel Smith, if you could give us an update on what's going on with SIG API machinery. And I wanted to thank Daniel for agreeing to swap with SIG AWS, who's going through some leadership changes, and so I wanted to give their update next week.
Okay, well, this will be a low drama update then. I've got a much shorter update than the last couple. So SIG API machinery, we own the hub of the Kubernetes hub and spoke model. I just feel like I should give a plug for what we do, since I see a lot of PRs and issues assigned to us that act as if we own the API surface, which we don't. If you want to make wide-reaching API changes, that is a SIG architecture detail. We own the things that make the API function. So if you want to change a mechanism, if you want to put something in object metadata, you want to add a new streaming format, something like that, then that's our responsibility. Yeah, so we own more than that. That's a very brief overview. So things we are doing, the aggregation layer is going to V1 this release. So if you have experience with that, if you have bugs, please give us feedback very soon. Yesterday, I sent out a rather large design doc proposal for an evolution to kubectl apply. I sent that I started out with 3 SIGs, CLI, apps, and API machinery. One of the TLDRs, I want to move it to the control plane. So if you have thoughts on that, look in one of those SIG groups, or I can share it in Slack or something. And probably after I've gotten some feedback, I'll send it to Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And
If you can put a link to that in the notes for today's meeting.
sure. Next step would be those notes and Kubernetes dev, and I imagine we'll probably have to talk about this at SIG architecture. So that would be, the timeline for that would be rather long. So maybe all goes well in alpha and 1.11. We're certainly not trying to make major changes for 1.10. Next on the list, I would like to put out a request for feedback on the webhook, the admission webhook mechanisms. If you have used them and had good or bad experiences, please say something in the API Machinery Slack channel, or come to one of our SIG meetings, or send us an email on the SIG list. We are not advancing the webhooks this quarter, but we may want to next quarter, so we would really like to have feedback if you have any. Finally, I want to say some things about some code changes that we're making. My colleague Walter threaded the Go context structure through the cloud provider interface recently. So if you implemented a cloud provider, you now have a new parameter. And we are debating doing the same thing for the Go client. The downside is that anybody using the client would have to make a code change. The upside is it's extremely mechanical. You can probably write grep sed combo to fix all your code everywhere. The upside of doing this is that we gain in the future the ability to implement like request tracing, cancellation propagation, right? So this is only at the moment a change to the interface of the Go client, but it seems like a good idea to change both the Go client and the cloud provider in the same quarter. So just want to put that out there so that it doesn't catch people by surprise. If you think it's not worth it, then you can come debate with us in a SIG meeting. I think that's all I had scheduled on the list to tell you about.
Thank you very much for pitching and for delivering that update. People should take a look at those changes. So, a couple of announcements. One is we will be having our regularly scheduled office hours next week. That's next Wednesday, again in 2 different time slots. This is for people to meet members of the community and bring up problems and talk about contributing and all kinds of other things. Since next Wednesday conflicts with both the Helm Summit and the Index Conference, if you are not going to be at either of those events, we really need you to show up for office hours so that there are people there. So please do volunteer for that. And then we have one last topic here, which is to discuss LGTM and approve an automation behavior. Who's going to take the lead on that? Aaron?
I'll try and hurry real quickly. So I wanted to raise this in the context of the principle of least surprise. I introduced tied to the documentation team on the website repo. The documentation team's code review process up until now has been that they need an LGTM label from somebody who says this looks good from a docs perspective and somebody who says this looks good from a technical perspective. And they were surprised when we put in an owner's file at the root that gave docs people approval privileges that when they /LGTM'd, it automatically LGTM'd and approved things and things started getting merged unexpectedly. This was a little weird that an LGTM command would act kind of differently depending on who they were and where they were in the directory tree. I'll share my screen real briefly, but I'm kind of coming back to an issue I've hit here in the community a couple times, which is I'm trying to find the right forum to discuss process level changes or process level issues and make sure that we're talking to enough of the community and getting enough feedback from the community. So what I was proposing was the ability to say that LGTM should only mean LGTM and approved should only mean approved. Now, there are many of you on this call who are approvers in the Kubernetes repo. At least I'm pretty sure there are, because there are about 146 approvers in the Kubernetes repo, and some subset of you are hopefully on this call. And you may be really used to typing /LGTM and having it automatically issue an approval as well. But this concept of LGTM and approval, of reviewer and approver, kind of seems like something I keep having to explain to people as I bump into them. And so I was wondering if we could make this possibly more explicit. This generated a little bit of conversation, but my concern here is the conversation on this issue has mostly been between a few folks from contributor experience, a few folks from docs, and a few folks from SIG testing, and that I haven't hit enough of the larger community. To me, somebody who's been with this project for 2 years, I still find that this is a very magical way of doing things, and I would like to find a way for us to move to more explicit commands where LGTM just means LGTM and approved just means approved. That would mean that for 146 of you, I'd be increasing your workload by over 200% by asking that you type a couple more keystrokes. But I mean, this also kind of comes back to, like I said, docs had a different code review process initially where like they had LGTM for docs and LGTM for tech, and we're trying to force them into this exact same code review process that Kubernetes core uses. And it opens up the question, should every repo in this project be using the exact same code review process, or can we allow it to be configured on a per repo basis? I was hoping to have this discussion here, but we only have 5 minutes left and my Mac is kind of about to die. But does anybody have any thoughts or feedback on this?
I'll give just one bit of feedback. I think that a lot of people are interested in contributing across the project in different places, and having a consistent way that everything is done across the project is super, super, super important. I really just can't say strongly enough how much I say like configuring different policies for different parts of the project is going to add to confusion and overhead and all sorts of productivity issues.
I see Brian has moved closer to the microphone.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm one of the people who suggested the docs try this workflow. I mean, in general, I'm in favor of making it approval explicit. However, in this case, it seems like if the if the people owning the documentation are in the approvers file, then I don't quite understand the problem with approval from a doc. Approval with approval from a doc's perspective.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So, since I'm a SIG maintainer and I'm an owner of a lot of these things, like when I create a PR because I'm working on something, it will automatically set the approval since I'm
right.
the owner. And then someone may come by and LGTM it, and it auto merges before like we actually want it to go out. And so what we're trying to prevent is these like
wait. Can you
before it's ready to go out.
Back up a little bit? What kind of who is LGTMing it?
So, well, we need two, right? Because a lot of times we need both a tech and a docs one. And so if I create a PR and then someone comes by and does, like the tech LGTM, but it hasn't actually got the doc LGTM from someone else besides me, then it will merge. So we're just trying to...
You feel it's important for it to actually have a doc LGTM from someone other than you?
Yeah.
That your, contribution to that is not sufficient to make sure that it adheres to the doc conventions. You just want a second look at that. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, right. So we're just trying to prevent these like merges before we're ready to actually merge.
Yeah.
And then we could have everyone say explicit like /hold, but then it's sort of added.
No, I can tell you what I do. I get called in on a number of specific issues, like does this API look okay, or is this approach okay? So in those cases, when I'm not LG teaming the whole thing, I don't actually use the commands. I just say, yeah, it's okay, right? So it's a little bit less formal, but in general, someone is specifically asking specifically me. I don't know if that's the same case exactly for a technical review, whether we need labels to be able to identify things that have been tech approved but not docs approved or whatever. But I find, at least for my cases, that handling it informally seems to work.
Another use case I'll put out there is I happen to be in the owner's file at the root of the community repo. So there are times when I want to say that a document looks good, like it's grammatically written correctly and all the words are in the right order, but I'm not necessarily the subject matter expert for that particular domain, and I need somebody else to /approve it. But like if I /LGTM, because I'm in the root owner's file as an approver, it's automatically going to assume I'm approving it as well. So
I don't think there are any number of states that we can introduce that solve this problem globally, because there are a bunch of cases where we want certain other people to look at certain other aspects, and it may be more than one person looking at more than one aspect.
And I get that. That's kind of why we can organically use this hold label. To me, it's just that the /LGTM command does something different depending on who I am and where I am in the tree. And I would love for it to mean just LGTM.
I'm fine with that.
An explicit thing, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Those principles of least surprise. Andrew's talking about the implicit self-approval feature, which we do actually have as a configurable option within the submit queue. And I agree, I would love for consistency across the project. I'm just trying to raise the flag that newcomers who I've tried to introduce this stuff to are confused by it, and I think we could reduce that confusion if we made things more explicit. When I have tried to raise this issue in the past, I've gotten pushback from key and core contributors on the project. And I'm trying to figure out how I can have the most inclusive discussion and get to a decision with all these people, because we talked about this in SIG contributor experience yesterday, and it was kind of like an echo chamber where everybody agreed we should make everything super explicit. But I don't want that to, move people's cheese without telling them, so to speak. So I'm trying to figure out how we can proceed from here.
I have an idea. I mean, I don't know. Why don't we, I feel like the main problem is that if an owner submits a PR and then somebody drive-by LGTMs it, it gets merged and it doesn't get the review they want. So why don't we just remove that implicit approval? It's always an option, but you could always make it an option for owners to self-approve separately. So don't make it implicit, but make people explicitly /approve their own PR if that's what they want. That way you can prevent, oh my gosh, I wanted to, get feedback and just magically merged and I didn't mean for that to happen. Wouldn't that address at least part of it?
Sure, but I also think like the LGTM should not have approve in it either, because like for our workflow, I may want to LGTM it on the doc side, but not actually approve it to go out to get merged.
I think you're agreeing.
Yeah, it sounds like you're in agreement. I think we're going to need to continue to discuss this. Because we're out of time in the community meeting here.
I submitted a thread about this on Kubernetes Dev, and I will follow up there, and it links to the issue I showed. So I'll go there. But like I said, I want to figure out how to drive this forward and make sure we get agreement.
Mm-hmm. We might also want to find a time slot at the Contributor Summit for this. Anyway, we need to wind this up because we're over time, and some people have already had to drop. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. And I'll see you at the next community meeting and online. Thank you.